Answer me! Are you the bastard responsible for destroying the Soul Society or not?
Naturally.
Iconic characters in fiction often have a similarly iconic rival that helps elevate their development throughout their respective series. Dragon Ball has Goku and Vegeta, the Naruto series has Naruto and Sasuke, and in the case of Sonic, there is his rivalry with Shadow the Hedgehog. Aside from the fact that Shadow is the darker, edgier version of Sonic, I think the main thing Shadow has going for him is that he is arguably the best user of chaos-based abilities in the entire series, on top of the fact that he's almost always comparable to Sonic in physical stats. As you can tell by the title of the video, I'll be continuing my trend of Sonic videos by power scaling Shadow the Hedgehog. I'll mainly be going over Shadow's base form since his super form doesn't have too many feats and he doesn't have the crazy one-time forms like Sonic does. This is like my 4th Sonic video at this point, and obviously more will be on the way, so if you enjoy it, I'd like to ask you to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. It really does help the channel out a lot and I greatly appreciate it. With the introduction out of the way, we'll start with Shadow's first appearance, which is Sonic Adventure 2. The manuals for this game state that while Sonic may be the fastest hedgehog, he now has some competition with the appearance of Shadow, and this is directly supported by their battles. In their first confrontation, Shadow does not actually fight Sonic, but he does showcase that he can react to Sonic's running speed when he activates Chaos Control in response to seeing Sonic run at him. These two meet again later on in the Green Forest, and they have an actual battle this time. Depending on what story you're playing, the gameplay for this fight might be a bit different. In the hero story, you play as Sonic and the game has you defeat Shadow to progress forward. In the dark story, the roles are reversed and you play as Shadow, with the game making you defeat Sonic. Regardless of how well you perform on either side, the cutscene that follows this fight shows the two in a standstill and both are breathing heavily, which tells us that the hedgehogs were a bit worn out after this clash. This fight ends inconclusively, but they meet again for one last battle outside of the space colony Ark. For this battle, Shadow's objective is to straight up kill Sonic before he can destroy the barrel for the Eclipse Canon, but he ultimately fails to do so. By this point, Sonic learns how to replicate Shadow's chaos controlled teleportation despite using a fake Chaos Emerald. With the one advantage Shadow had neutralized, it would ultimately come down to who the superior fighter was, and going off the fact that Sonic succeeds in his goal, it appears that fighter was Sonic. Shadow's base form scaling to Sonic's base even this early on is quite impressive. If you kept up with my recent Sonic videos, you're probably aware of the argument that Sonic has defeated the Death Egg robot, which appears to power the planet-destroying battleship that is the Death Egg multiple times. The plot of Sonic Unleashed also features numerous large fragments of the Earth being restored by individual Chaos Emeralds. Due to the sheer size of the fragments and the speed that they are being moved at, the raw kinetic energy needed to perform this feat is around 3.4 times 10 to the 34 joules, or over 81 Yoda tons, which is considered to be within the large planet level on most tiering systems. Now, while that might seem like a huge jump, I don't think it would be too far-fetched to scale Shadow to these feats from Unleashed, since he claims to be the only one capable of using the true power of the Chaos Emeralds in Sonic Battle, which would make sense since his genetics from Black Doom give him a natural affinity for Chaos abilities. You can further support this planetary scale by scaling Shadow off of Perfect Chaos. For those who may not know, Chaos is a water creature that also happens to be the God of Destruction for this series. This God of Destruction possesses a metamorphosis ability that allows him to grow more powerful as he absorbs more Chaos Emeralds. Perfect Chaos is the final and ultimate form of Chaos that he achieves after absorbing all the negative energy of all 7 Chaos Emeralds, and is obviously way stronger than all of his previous forms, including Chaos 6. I'm highlighting Chaos 6 in particular because, like the name implies, this form is only powered by 6 Chaos Emeralds, and 6 emeralds are used to perform an interesting feat in Sonic Adventure 2. I'm sure most of you have seen the feat where Eggman destroys half of the moon using the Eclipse Cannon to basically flex on the whole world and threaten them with his power. Beyond just the destroyed portions of the moon, we also see huge fragments of the moon getting launched away at high speeds. Using the cinematic timing of around 4 to 6 seconds and some pixel scaling magic, you can argue that these fragments were being launched away at hypersonic speeds. Due to their size and speed, the kinetic energy for this would need to be around 2.8 times 10 to the 33 joules to 6.4 times 10 to the 33 joules, both of which are within planetary ranges. Sonic has a direct battle with Chaos 6, but it's very contentious to scale Sonic to him using this specific specific battle, since this fight involves Sonic needing to use satellites to freeze Chaos so he can actually deal damage to him. If you said Sonic would scale to this, you can of course directly scale Shadow to this due to their relativity in Sonic Adventure 2. If not, you could just scale Shadow to the later version of Sonic and Sonic Generations, who could defeat perfect Chaos in just its base form. This Shadow the Hedgehog boss fight in Generations showcases that Shadow is relative to Sonic at this point, and the Encyclopedia even implies that Sonic needed to absorb the purple energy sphere featured in the boss fight to overwhelm Shadow, which implies he can't do it in just its base form. Beyond just Generations, there are many times throughout the series where Sonic and Shadow are shown or stated to be relative. For example, Sonic alongside Knuckles and Tails have a fight with Shadow alongside Omega and Rogue in Sonic Heroes. The game doesn't show us the direct aftermath of this fight, but it does seem like Shadow had fled from the fight in pursuit of Eggman, since Eggman was his main priority at the time. The Sonic Heroes manual does tell us that Shadow is a match for Sonic's speed and abilities, so it'd be very safe to assume that the fight was a stalemate prior to Shadow's group leaving. The manual for Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing similarly tells us Shadow easily rivals Sonic in both speed and power, and lastly, the DS version of Sonic Colors even has Omega's data telling us that Shadow is equal to Sonic. I also want to note that Shadow being at all comparable to later version of Sonic shows that he's been getting stronger throughout the series as well. While Shadow is never noted to train or get stronger every second like Sonic is, being able to compete with these later, stronger versions of Sonic will require Shadow to have gotten stronger as well, obviously. Before I move on to Shadow's power-ups and conclude the base form portion of the video, I wanted to address a star level meta for base Sonic characters I've seen floating around. I think star level may be the highest you could push base form characters realistically, but the evidence and arguments supporting this are not strong in my opinion. The position does seem a bit popular from what I can tell, so I thought I'd explain my position on it, since the majority of this video is base Shadow scaling. So in the Shadow the Hedgehog game, Black Doom makes a statement about how the Eclipse Cannon can pierce stars when it's at full power, which would be when it has the Chaos Emeralds powering it. If you think any base form level character is comparable to the Eclipse Cannon, then this would drastically upscale Shadow and the other cast members beyond the planetary arguments I outlined earlier. The best way you could go about scaling Shadow to this statement is just using his feats on Emerald. Shadow has a few clashes with Emerald after the robot had absorbed all 7 Chaos Emeralds, and later takes on Emerald alongside Sonic in a 2-on-1 battle. For that battle in particular, Emerald specifically tells the Hedgehog that there's no holding back, and he even taunts them about hoping they don't get hurt. The complications for this come in when you try directly comparing Emerald to the Eclipse Cannon. There is no direct statement comparing the two machines, however you could maybe derive some implications from Emerald's backstory. In Sonic Battle, the game that features Emerald, we get some of Emerald's origins explained by Professor Gerald Robotnik's journal. In the 6th entry, we learned that the Guardian Units of Nations, or GUN for short, was experimenting on Emerald. It had absorbed too much energy and went on a rampage in the Space Colony arc. Both Gun and Geralt thought that the Gizoid needed to be put out of commission, and while Gun's attempt to seal it was successful, Geralt was unable to destroy its core. At the very best, you could interpret a narrative that Geralt thought Emerald was too powerful to be active, but didn't share a similar view on the Eclipse Cannon, which would indicate Emerald's superiority. In my opinion, this is a very massive stretch. The main reason Emerald is such a dangerous robot is because of its copyability and its ability to grow massively stronger from copying things, training, and absorbing technology. The more Emerald increases its strength, the more unstable it becomes and can eventually reach a point where it indiscriminately attacks everything, which is proven by Geralt's journal entry I mentioned earlier. This is also proven in the ending portions of Sonic Battle, which has Emerald go berserk because the energy from the final Egg Blaster was too overwhelming. To put it simply, it's very easy for Emerald to lose control and thus become a huge liability compared to the Eclipse Cannon, which is stationary and is only activated when it has Chaos Emeralds lashed onto it, and at that point it can be operated inside a control room inside the Ark. You could also make the case that Gun may not have known about the existence of the Eclipse Cannon, since Shadow outright says that not many people know about it, so the military not doing anything wouldn't prove much. You could also make a case that Emerald should have copied Shadow's talent for using Chaos Energy and should be capable of using them to their full extent, but Shadow himself directly contradicts this. Despite experiencing this ability and knowing that giving Emerald the Chaos Emeralds would unlock its true power and how it could destroy the world, he still claims that he is the only one who can use the true power of the Emeralds. So while Emerald does have Shadow's abilities, going off of this statement, he believes he can use them better than Emerald can. This is just like how a series like Naruto has many characters using the same technique but aren't on the same level despite that. For example, Kid Naruto's Sharingan is not at all comparable to Jiraiya's, even though it's the same ability. At best, you could say Shadow could scale to this piercing star statement if he was utilizing all 7 emeralds, but at that point he would just use his super form, which is way stronger than star level. While making this point, I should also mention that Perfect Chaos should be a good enough user of chaos energy to directly scale above what 6 emeralds are capable of, since it stated that only Supersonic had the power and speed capable of taking him down. This implies that any other level of power that was available at the time would be incapable of handling Perfect Chaos, which includes a hypothetical 6 Chaos Emerald Amp Sonic. I just want to mention that in case anyone wanted to ask why I didn't apply similar skepticism for the argument comparing the Chaos to the Eclipse Cannon. The second star level argument is centered around Emerald absorbing the final Egg Blaster, which destroys stars, which is an argument I addressed in my Sonic vs Goku video. I'll keep it brief here since I already explained it there, but to put it simply, Emerald only absorbed the leftover energy after the final Egg Blaster destroyed the stars, which is in no way quantifiable, and this energy was too much for it to handle regardless, and was damaging itself by simply containing that energy. When factoring in the full context, Emerald very clearly does not scale to this. The last argument comes from Sonic Forces, which features another star related feat with Infinite and his feat of creating a sun in the climax of the war. Even when being very generous, I would say Shadow wouldn't scale to this, since I'd argue Sonic is stronger than Shadow in this game and is thus weaker than Infinite, but Sonic vs Shadow could be a topic for a whole another video, so I won't dive into that here. If you'd like to see a video covering that, then let me know in the comments, but for the sake of this video, I'll grant that Shadow is equal to Sonic and Sonic Forces. The problem with Infinite Sun creation feat is that it's obviously way smaller than our actual sun, that it sits in the middle of our solar system. According to NASA, the diameter of our sun is around 109 times greater than the diameter of Earth, and it would take around 1.3 million Earths to fill the entire volume of the sun. It should go without saying that if Infinite made a perfect replica of our sun, then it would severely dwarf the Earth and even upset the balance of the solar system because of its own gravity. Neither of these things occur in Sonic Forces, and from what we do see, Infinite Sun is well contained within Earth's atmosphere and is bound by Earth's gravitational pull. Even ignoring the fact that Infinite is nerfed after making this and Sonic is amped in the second half of the last battle, I think it's very unreasonable to say this would be a star level feat. Now we can move on to Shadow's power-ups. There's not too many, but since I mentioned a bunch of forms for Sonic in my video of him, I thought I'd do the same here. This Shadow the Hedgehog game also showcases the Hero Shadow and Dark Shadow forms. Shadow can transform into the Hero form when his mind is fueled by thoughts of justice, and on the opposite end he can transform into the Dark form when his mind is fueled by thoughts of evil. Both forms grant a brief state of invincibility, and the Hero form enhances Shadow's teleportation, while the Dark form grants him access to the Chaos Blast. These are never shown or mentioned after this game, so there's not much else to talk about for these forms. Shadow's most iconic power-up is likely the amp he gets from removing his inhibitor rings. Funnily enough, Shadow has only taken them off one time in Canon, and that was against Mephiles the Dark in Sonic 06. What's really interesting is that Shadow takes these off in response to Mephiles making a bunch of clones of himself using 2 Chaos Emeralds. Shadow tears through these clones pretty easily, and if you think Mephiles was amping himself and the clones using the Chaos Emeralds he had then, that means that Shadow's amp was greater than the boost of 2 Chaos Emeralds. It is just as likely that Mephiles only used these emeralds to create the clones and not to amplify his stats, and the Prima guide for Sonic 06 suggests that Mephiles made these clones by using his own strength, so if you went this route, the amp would be unquantifiable. Sonic 06 also introduces the Chaos Boost transformation, which makes Shadow grow stronger, makes him invincible to enemy attacks, gives him access to the Chaos Snap, Chaos Lance, and Chaos Blast. Chaos Snap is an ability that has Shadow instantly in front of up to 5 enemies for a chain of attacks. The Chaos Lance is just a stronger version of the Chaos Spear, and the Chaos Blast is just an explosion of Chaos energy, and it's also the most powerful of the Chaos boost moves I mentioned. Lastly, and certainly not least, we have Super Shadow. Super Shadow is Shadow's strongest form to date, though it does not have many appearances. In the few appearances it does have, only 3 of them involve Shadow actually fighting and not being some spin-off cameo. In an ironic twist, this makes Super Shadow's best scaling the fact that he's relative to Super Sonic. If you kept up with my Sonic videos so far, you'll know that I currently have Super Sonic at 5D, since the Chaos Emeralds can compose a double power with the Soul Emeralds to create a 5D realm. And of course, cutting 5D power in half is still 5D. Super Shadow does fight the likes of Final Hazard, Double Doom, and Solaris, but Solaris is the only relevant fight of the 3. The best scaling for Final Hazard and Double Doom comes from the fighting Super Shadow, so there's not much to say about them. Solaris is one of the strongest bosses we've seen in Sonic, but I don't believe Shadow scales to his full strength. Solaris is super dimensional beyond the 5D levels of power of the Chaos Emeralds, which would make him at least 6D at his strongest. The problem with trying to scale Sonic, Shadow, or Silver to him is that they only destroy Solaris' armor in the first phase of the fight, which is implied to be anchoring Solaris by an entire dimensional tier. With this armor out of the picture, they realize they can't actually harm Solaris' physical body, so they opt to destroying his consciousness instead. Considering the implied higher dimensionality for Solaris, not being able to hurt his true body makes sense, though this would grant Shadow the ability to perform 6D mental attacks. That's pretty much all for the video though. Like I said, I'm obviously going to make tons more Sonic videos in the future. I get help on all of my Sonic videos from my friend Striker. He knows a lot more about the series than I do. He's played all the games, and mostly, if not all, the information comes directly from him. So you should check out his TikTok. I'll obviously leave you a link in the description. If you liked the video, I'd obviously appreciate if you would leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel. But other than that, have a nice day.